I saw her car parked right at the entrance of the restaurant. An expensive model, shining under the lights of the golden sign that reflected on the impeccable bodywork. The same car I bought, the same car she used to go to work, to pick up groceries, to visit her family. The same car she drove when we went out to dinner together, to celebrate our small victories. Now, there it stood before me like a cruel warning of what was to come. A punch in the gut. Your stomach is churning, your blood is freezing, your hands are sweating. The heart was hammering in the chest, an unbridled drum of anger, disbelief, and that feeling that the world was about to fall apart. I could be mistaken. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe she was here for some reason I didn't know. But something inside me screamed no. Something inside me already knew. A primitive, brutal instinct pushed me forward. My legs felt heavy, but I continued. With each step, the truth became clearer. I walked through the door of the restaurant and the smell of sophisticated food mixed with the expensive perfume of rich people invaded my nostrils, but I couldn't feel anything other than a growing fury. My eyes swept the room, the crystal chandeliers shone on the tables, the waiters moved like discreet shadows, and there, right in the center, sitting at a table reserved for two, was her. Elegant. Tight dress, impeccable hair, a smile that seemed rehearsed, as if nothing in the world worried her. As if life were perfect. And, in front of him, a man. He laughed, leaning over the table, as if he were telling her something intimate, something that made her shine even more. My chest tightened. The world around me dissipated. All that existed at that moment was that image. My wife. My wife. The woman who shared with me a home, a future, a history. Sitting there, with another man, as if I didn't exist. As if everything we built together was just an insignificant detail of her life. My vision blurred for a moment. The air became thick, almost impossible to breathe. I could hear the muffled sound of conversations all around, of glasses clinking, of laughter. But everything seemed distant. Everything seemed like an illusion. My entire body was burning, and it was at that moment that I knew, I wasn't going to leave there silently. I wouldn't swallow this humiliation. My throat felt dry, but my voice sounded steady, cutting through the air like a blade. Congratulations. You managed to destroy everything. The entire restaurant fell silent. She turned to me in surprise, her face losing color in an instant. Eyes wide, hands shaking as they put down the cutlery. Her lover froze, trying to understand what was happening. But I wasn't there for explanations. I didn't need answers. I already knew everything. Our marriage is over. And it's over now. The words came out sharp, implacable. I didn't need to scream. The weight of the truth did that for me. She opened her mouth, stuttering, desperately looking for an excuse, a way out. It's not what you think. But I laughed. I laughed because that was the most pathetic sentence that could come out of a traitor's mouth. It's not what I think. Then what is it? You're sitting here with him, holding his hand, smiling at him. And I'm supposed to believe it's what? A business meeting? A romantic coincidence? My words hit her like whiplash. The silence in the restaurant became deafening. Everyone looked. Everyone saw it. But I didn't care. She tried to get up, tried to touch my arm, but I moved away. Don't touch me. My eyes bored into her. You disgust me. Her lover cleared his throat, trying to gain the courage to speak. But before he said anything, my gaze burned him all over. If I were you, I'd stay real quiet. He lowered his head. Pathetic. A coward. A mouse enjoying the remains of a marriage he didn't help build, but took pleasure in destroying. And her? She was there, shaking, embarrassed, humiliated. But not for me. Not because he loved me. But because she was caught. Because his mask fell in front of everyone. Because, at that moment, she knew her world was about to fall apart. Do you want to know the worst of all? My voice was lower, more bitter. I loved you. I really loved you. And as I said that, I felt the weight of betrayal crushing my chest. Because it was true. Because I would have done anything for her. And she threw it all away like it was worthless. I left the ring on the table. An alliance that meant years, promises, nights and mornings. A wedding ring that was now just a worthless piece of metal. She tried to say something, anything, but the words died in her throat. Because there was nothing more to be said. I walked away. The entire restaurant followed me with their eyes. They saw everything. They witnessed the end of a story that, until that moment, I believed to be true. What no one knew was that this wasn't the worst yet. The worst was yet to come. The real blow had not yet been struck. Because, that same night, she would try to manipulate me in front of everyone. She would kneel, cry, beg for my forgiveness. But not because he loved me. Not because he regretted it. And yes, because I knew that, without me, her world would never be the same. And then, there, in front of everyone, would see his true face. The face of someone who does not regret betrayal, but rather its consequences. The story isn't over yet. But when it's over, one thing will be certain, no one will emerge unscathed. Welcome to the channel. Here, the betrayal it is neither romanticized nor justified. All stories are fictional, but the pain, disappointment and consequences are real. Our goal is to show how betrayal destroys lives, families and hearts, leaving marks that never disappear. Get ready for a story shocking, intense and unforgettable. Let the naked truth of betrayal begin. James has always been a practical man. He worked hard, believed in the value of effort and the importance of loyalty. From a young age, he learned that life offered no shortcuts and that each achievement came from sweat and dedication. This is how he built his career, his reputation and, most importantly, his family. When he met Olivia years ago, he felt something different, something that made him believe that, perhaps, some things in life didn't need to be achieved with so much effort, some just happened. Olivia was the type of woman who filled a room without needing to speak loudly. Her smile lit up any space, and her presence made any man want to be better, to stand out, to become someone worthy of being by her side. James fell in love with this aura, this vibrant energy she carried. From the first moment, I knew I wanted to build a future with her. Their wedding was like a dream. Friends and family commented on how perfect they were for each other. The complicity between the two was undeniable, the subtle gestures of affection, the way they looked at each other, the way they laughed at the same jokes. Olivia was smart, determined, full of life, and James deeply admired her for that. He never had any doubts that she was the woman of his life. Together, they built a comfortable routine, surrounded by small rituals that kept them connected. Every morning, they had coffee together. James enjoyed the silence of the early hours of the day, while Olivia always brought up a new topic to discuss. She was talking about a book she read, an interesting piece of news, something curious she saw on the street. He listened, taking in every detail, fascinated by the way her mind worked. Sometimes he would just smile and tell her how much he loved her. Olivia reciprocated with a look full of tenderness. James worked a lot, maybe too much. His career has always required long hours, business trips, endless meetings. He knew it took him away from Olivia at times, but he never questioned whether it could be a problem. He did it for them, for the future they planned together, for the comfort he wanted to provide her. Olivia always said she understood. He said he was proud of him, that he admired his effort, his discipline. But, on some lonely nights, when silence took over the house and the clock ticked late without James being around, something inside her seemed to break, an emptiness that she couldn't fill. It wasn't that she didn't love him, because she did, but there was a part of her that yearned for something more, for something she couldn't name. Something you perhaps didn't even know was missing. Their home was large and elegant, decorated with every detail hand-picked by Olivia. She always had a special talent for transforming spaces into homes, for choosing the right tones, the perfect lighting, the small pieces that brought comfort. James loved that about her. When I came home from work, exhausted, and saw the care she put into every corner of the house, I felt like it was worth all the effort. He knew that she had a lot of free time, that she dedicated her afternoons to personal projects, meetings with friends, and social events. But he never questioned what exactly she did with that time. I trusted her. I trusted blindly. After all, a relationship only survives with trust, right? Olivia liked to be admired. Not in a superficial way, but to feel that his presence had an impact, that his smile aroused emotions, that his intelligence was appreciated. It's always been like this. James did that, of course. But as the years went by, as the routine became predictable, sometimes it seemed like he didn't see her in the same way as before. She missed that butterflies in her stomach, that game of conquest, that energy of newness. But I never said anything. Never charged anything. He just went on, day after day, convincing himself that this was just the reality of any long marriage. That there was nothing wrong with that. Weekends were dedicated to spending time together. Dinners, outings, small trips when James's work allowed. He tried to make up for his absence on weekdays with full attention on his days off. And for a while, it worked. They laughed, they had fun, they looked the same as before. But soon the routine returned, and that emptiness returned to haunt Olivia. James didn't understand. He believed he was doing everything right. He offered stability, love, respect. For him, that was enough. For her, maybe it wasn't. But Olivia never complained. He never gave any obvious signs that anything was wrong. At least, not signs that James could see. Their social circle was large, full of influential friends, sophisticated dinners, and charity events. James wasn't a big fan of that kind of thing, but he attended for Olivia, because he knew how much it mattered to her. He liked to see her shine, to see her being the center of attention, talking to everyone, enchanting with her presence. But she never stopped to think that, in these events, she could also be searching for something. Something he was no longer offering without realizing it. One day, Olivia began to subtly change. Little details that James noticed but ignored. She started to take more care of her appearance, to dress more neatly, to smile in a different way, as if she always had something new on her mind. His cell phone began to become a more frequent companion, his messages were answered with a sparkle in his eyes that he didn't understand. But James was never the paranoid type. He was not a man to suspect, to question, to doubt. For him, Olivia was his wife. An incredible, loyal woman, your partner. He never imagined there was something between the lines, something he wasn't seeing. Time passed, and although there were moments when James felt an inexplicable distance between them, he refused to believe that anything could be wrong. Because deep down, he believed in Olivia. I believed in what we built together. I believed their love was solid, unshakable. But fate, cruel as always, was about to show him that not everything was as safe as it seemed. He just didn't know it yet. And when he found out, it would be too late. The last few weeks had been strange. James couldn't put his finger on exactly what it was, but he felt it. He felt it in Olivia's eyes, in the way her voice seemed distant even when they were in the same room, in the way she smiled at her cell phone more than she smiled at him. Little details that, if they were isolated, might not mean anything, but together they formed a pattern that he couldn't ignore. He tried to push away the thoughts, tried to tell himself that it was just in his head, that it was the accumulated tiredness, the stress of work, the routine that inevitably changed people over time. But something inside him was restless. Something he couldn't name. That morning, Olivia woke up earlier than usual. James felt movement in the bed, the light touch of the sheets being pulled aside, her scent wafting through the air as he walked through the dark room. He heard her take a shower, choose her clothes more carefully than usual, hear the zipper of her bag being closed with almost rehearsed care. She was leaving earlier than usual, and when he asked where she was going, she hesitated for a second before smiling and saying she had an appointment downtown. James wanted to believe it. He always wanted to believe. The day dragged by, restlessness becoming a constant weight on his shoulders. He tried to ignore it, immersed himself in work, attended meetings, had lunch with colleagues who laughed and talked about things that didn't make sense to him at that moment. The head was elsewhere. When he returned home, Olivia was already there, beautiful as always, with that smile he always loved, but now seemed different. Less genuine. Or maybe it was just his paranoia getting the better of him. He didn't question, he didn't insist. He just swallowed that bitter feeling and tried to go with the flow. But the routine kept changing. Olivia started going out more, getting ready more carefully, smiling more to herself, as if she had a secret that made her float. When he tried to get closer, she gently avoided him, as if she didn't want to be rude, but at the same time she didn't want to give in. James began to feel like something was being stolen from him. Something that he didn't know exactly what it was, but that was becoming more and more palpable. The nights with her started to become lonelier, even when they were together. The silence between the two grew like an invisible shadow, occupying the spaces previously filled with words and laughter. One day, he saw a message on her cell phone. It was by chance, as Olivia left the device on the table and walked away for a moment. The name on the screen was unfamiliar. A masculine name. The message said something simple, but loaded with something that made his blood run cold: "I can't wait to see you again." His heart raced, his mind spun in 1,000 directions. He wanted to believe it was nothing, wanted to hold on to the hope that there might be a logical explanation for it. But a part of him already knew. He already knew he was about to face something that would change his life forever. Over the next few days, he began to observe her more closely. The discreet smiles while typing on the cell phone, the sudden disappearances, the increasingly less convincing excuses. Olivia looked different. It was distant. She was in love with something, or someone, that wasn't him. James felt like he was watching his marriage slip through his fingers, helpless, unable to stop whatever was happening. But he wasn't the kind of man who took doubt for an answer. He needed to know. He needed to see it with his own eyes. And then, that night, everything happened. He didn't plan, he didn't engineer anything. It just happened. He left work early, tired of the uncertainty, the weight he carried in his chest. On the way home, he saw Olivia's car parked in front of a luxurious restaurant. It wasn't a place they usually went together, it wasn't a place that was part of her routine. Her heart sped up, and a chill ran down her spine. He stopped the car on the other side of the street, his eyes fixed on the scene before him. Olivia got out of the car wearing a dress he didn't remember seeing before. Elegant, tight, impeccable. She walked into the restaurant with purposeful steps, and a few minutes later, he saw a man approach, smiling, touching her hand in a way that made his stomach turn. They sat together, the conversation flowing with a naturalness that only existed between those who were involved in a way James didn't want to imagine. He didn't know how long he stayed there, standing still, watching. Maybe minutes, maybe hours. All he knew was that, at that moment, something inside him broke. Something that couldn't be fixed. He felt the betrayal before he even confirmed it. He felt it in the way Olivia looked at that man, in the way she smiled at him, in the sparkle in her eyes that she no longer had when she looked at James. His mind screamed at him to get out of there, to not make this more real than it already was. But his body refused to obey. He needed to face it. I needed to see it. With firm steps, he crossed the street and entered the restaurant. The luxurious atmosphere, the impeccable tables, people laughing and talking as if nothing wrong in the world was happening. But something was wrong. Something was very wrong. His eyes found Olivia, and in that instant, time seemed to slow down. She hadn't seen him yet. I was still immersed in the conversation, in the presence of that man, in that moment that shouldn't exist. But then, as if an instinct warned her, she looked up. And he found his. For an instant, the world froze. Her smile disappeared, her body stiffened. The man next to him frowned, confused, trying to understand what was happening. But James didn't look away. He remained there, still, feeling every cell in his body burn with a mixture of pain, anger and disbelief. He wanted to talk. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask why. But there were no words that could convey what I felt. Olivia opened her mouth, as if she was going to say something, but couldn't. She knew there was no explanation that could erase that moment. The silence that followed was worse than any response she could have given. And then, James took the final step. He approached the table, his gaze fixed on her eyes. The entire restaurant seemed to have gone silent, as if the room itself felt the tension in the air. When he finally opened his mouth, his voice was low but sharp as a blade. "Our marriage is over." Just that. Just 4 words. But they carried the weight of everything that had once existed between them. Olivia blinked, as if trying to process, as if trying to find a way out. But there was no way out. The truth was there, wide open, impossible to ignore. James exhaled slowly, feeling reality settle into his bones. There was no turning back. There were no more doubts. What he didn't know was that this was just the beginning. Because, that very night, Olivia would do something he would never have imagined. Something that would change everything in ways he wasn't yet prepared to face. The silence between them was deafening. Olivia remained still, her eyes wide, her breath caught in her chest, as if she didn't know whether to react or simply collapse right there. The man next to her moved away slightly, not knowing if he should intervene or if he would just be a spectator of something much bigger than himself. James felt the weight of the moment crushing his shoulders, but he didn't look away. He wanted to see her try to justify the unjustifiable, he wanted to hear some explanation from her mouth, anything that made sense, even though he knew that nothing else could be fixed. But Olivia, contrary to what he expected, didn't burst into tears, didn't beg, didn't despair. Instead, she did something he could never have predicted. Slowly, she stood up. The entire restaurant seemed suspended in time, awaiting her reaction, but Olivia ignored everyone around her. His eyes were fixed on James's, and his expression was neither fearful nor regretful. It was something colder, more calculated. She licked her lips, took a deep breath and finally broke the silence. "You are exaggerating. Things are not as simple as they seem." Her voice was firm, but it didn't have the sweetness it had before. There was no longer any trace of the woman he knew, the woman he believed he loved. He frowned, trying to understand what he was hearing. "Aren't they simple?" he repeated, disbelief rising within him. "I catch you having dinner with another man, holding his hand, smiling at him like I don't exist, and you tell me it's not simple." Olivia took a deep breath, crossed her arms, and her gaze changed, hardening. "You never noticed, did you?" His voice now carried an almost impatient tone, as if he was the only one who wasn't seeing the truth. "Never noticed what?" He clenched his fists, feeling his chest burn. That this had been happening for months. That it wasn't a sudden choice, nor an impulsive mistake. She tilted her head, a bitter smile appearing on her lips. "And do you know why? Because I knew you would never leave me. I knew you trusted me so much, I never would have imagined. I knew I could lie and you would believe it." Her words were like blades piercing his skin. James felt anger pulse through his veins, but before he could speak, Olivia stepped forward. "And even now, after everything, you still think this story ends here?" Her question hung in the air. James felt a shiver run down his spine. There was something more. Something he didn't know yet. Something that would change everything in ways he wasn't prepared to face. Olivia noticed his hesitation and let out a short, dry laugh. Do you know what the worst part is? His voice lowered, becoming almost a whisper. I prepared myself for this moment. I knew that sooner or later you would find out. But what you don't know, James, is that the betrayal was just part of it. His heart stopped for a second. Every muscle in his body went rigid. What do you mean by that? He asked, voice scratchy in his throat. She sighed, running her hands through her hair as if preparing to deliver a final blow. Do you think I'm the problem? She laughed, a bitter laugh that made his skin crawl. The problem, James, is that you trusted me enough to give me control over everything. The bills, the investments, the properties. You gave me everything on a plate. And me? I knew exactly how to use it. Realization hit him like an electric shock. He blinked, trying to process what he was hearing. What are you talking about? He whispered, mouth dry. Olivia leaned in closer, her eyes shining with something between arrogance and cruel pleasure. While you spent nights and nights away, while you worked tirelessly, while you blindly trusted your devoted wife. I transferred money, rewrote documents, signed contracts. You have nothing left, James. Absolutely nothing. The air was knocked from his lungs. The ground beneath his feet seemed to give way. He wanted to believe it was a lie, that it was just a tease, a desperate attempt to hurt him more than he already had. But he knew Olivia. I knew that coldness, that calculating look. He had never seen it directed at him before, but now he saw it clearly. It was real. Every word. Every blow. You destroyed everything, he whispered, tasting the bitter truth. Olivia smiled. No, James. You destroyed it when you believed that love was enough. When you thought trust was enough. When you forgot that a relationship is a game, and that only one of us was playing. The entire restaurant seemed to have stopped breathing. James felt his entire body shaking, not from anger, but from something much worse. Desolation. Loss. He lost his marriage. He lost his dignity. And now he realized that he had lost much more than that. Olivia picked up her bag, took one last look at him and, with a slight nod, walked out of the restaurant, leaving behind a man who, until a few minutes ago, thought he had everything. Now, he had nothing. But the only thing James knew for sure was that it wouldn't end there. Because, contrary to what Olivia thought, he wasn't a man who accepted losing. James remained still, motionless, as the restaurant returned to normal around him, as if nothing had happened, as if his world hadn't ended there, in front of everyone. He felt the weight of curious looks, some people whispered discreetly, others avoided looking at him, but it all seemed distant, unreal. Her mind was spinning, trying to take in every word Olivia had said. The betrayal was already a brutal blow, but what came after it, that was much worse. He had nothing left. Everything she built, everything she worked for, everything she sacrificed, now belonged to her. How did he allow this to happen? How was he so blind? His knuckles were white from clenching his fists. The desire to run after her, to demand explanations, to confront her, burned inside him like a red-hot ember. But he knew Olivia wouldn't give in. She wasn't the type to regret it, and even worse, she had already won. Or at least that's what she thought. He felt a bitter taste in his mouth, frustration mixed with a hatred he had never experienced before. He left the restaurant without looking back, without caring about the whispers, the expressions of shock and compassion. All that was irrelevant now. The night was cold, but he felt nothing but the heat of adrenaline burning through his veins. His steps were quick, his mind working at top speed. He needed to understand exactly what had happened. He needed to know how far Olivia had gone with her plan. He picked up his cell phone and dialed his lawyer. He called once, twice, 3 times. James. The voice on the other end sounded surprised. Need you now. His voice came out hard, cutting. What happened? The lawyer asked, but James didn't waste time explaining. Our prenup, our accounts, our investments. I want to know what's in her name. I want to know now. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. James felt a tightness in his chest. James. The voice came tense, hesitant. She has control over more than you know. The blood ran cold. He stopped in the middle of the sidewalk, his heart hammering in his chest. Say it already. His patience was in tatters. The documents were signed months ago. Transfers, authorizations. Everything legalized. From a legal point of view, Olivia now has majority control of practically all of her assets. James felt the words like punches to the gut. He wanted to scream, wanted to break something, but he forced himself to take a deep breath. Then tell me there's something we can do. The lawyer hesitated for a moment. The only thing we have is that some transfers were made suspiciously. If we can prove bad faith or manipulation, we can challenge them. It was a fragile hope, but it was something. James wouldn't accept losing everything without a fight. Meet me at the office first thing tomorrow. I want every detail, every document, every move she made. No matter what it takes, I will get back what's mine. He hung up before the lawyer could say anything else. The night seemed darker, denser. He needed to see her again. I needed to look into her eyes and understand how far she was willing to go. He took the car and drove without thinking, without looking at the signs, without caring about the speed. When he realized it, he was already standing in front of the house that until that morning he still considered his home. The lights were on, as if nothing had happened. As if she had simply returned home and carried on with her life normally, without any weight on her conscience. He got out of the car, crossed the garden and knocked loudly on the door. Seconds later, Olivia appeared. She was already waiting for him. He was wearing a silk robe, holding a glass of wine, and his face was serene, almost indifferent. I knew you would come. His voice held no surprise, no guilt. Just that coldness that now seemed to be part of her. James entered uninvited, closing the door behind him. So you prepared all this? His voice was full of resentment. Olivia sighed and leaned against the wall, lightly turning the glass in her hands. If you mean I planned to leave your wedding with everything I cared about, yes. I did. James felt a lump in his throat. He no longer recognized her. The woman he shared his life with, the woman he believed he knew better than anyone else, now seemed like a complete stranger. Why? He asked, unable to contain the pain in his voice. Why not just get divorced? Why destroy everything like that? Olivia gave a small laugh, a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. Because I wanted it to hurt, James. Because I wanted you to feel what I felt for so long. The difference is that I learned to channel my frustration into something useful. James took a step forward, his gaze dark and filled with fury. You never told me you were unhappy. Olivia raised her eyebrows, as if she found that sentence ridiculous. And you never noticed. And that's the problem. You never noticed anything, James. You always thought that doing the basics was enough. That bringing home money and telling me you loved me every now and then was all I needed. But I needed more. I wanted more. And if you couldn't give it to me, then I would take it. James closed his eyes for a moment, trying to control the storm inside him. What now? What do you want now? Olivia tilted her head, assessing him. Now. She smiled slightly, that smile full of venom. Now, I want to see you crawl. I want to see you try to take it all back and fail. I want to see you drown in your own naivety. James felt his blood boil, every muscle in his body screaming to react, to do something, to not let her have the last word. But then, something changed in his gaze. A dangerous calm, an unshakable determination. He wouldn't allow this story to end like this. Olivia might think she won, but he was still there. And he wasn't the kind of man who accepted losing. He took a step back, keeping his eyes fixed on hers. You think you win. But you don't know me as well as you think. Olivia's expression finally changed, for a brief second. This isn't over, Olivia. He turned on his heel and left, leaving behind a woman who, for the first time that night, seemed to hesitate. The door closed behind him with a bang. The cold of the night hit his face, but he felt nothing. Just the certainty that it wouldn't end there. He would fight. And when it was over, he would be the one to emerge victorious. Because if there was one thing Olivia forgot, it was that James always knew how to play the game. He just hadn't realized he was in a game until now. But now it was different. James drove aimlessly, his hands gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. The cold of the night didn't seem to reach him, anger boiling inside him like a storm about to break loose. Olivia's words echoed in her mind, repeating themselves like a nightmare that refused to end. She deceived him for months, betrayed him, stole from him and, even worse, did all of this with the certainty that he would never notice. She not only destroyed the marriage, but turned her trust, her loyalty, her commitment into a cruel joke. And now? What was left for him? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. But he didn't accept that. I couldn't accept the story ending like this. He stopped the car abruptly on the shoulder, his headlights illuminating the empty road. He took a deep breath, trying to calm the wave of thoughts that suffocated him. The lawyer said that some of the transfers made by Olivia had irregularities. It was his only chance, his only opportunity to take back what was taken from him. But he knew this wouldn't be easy. Olivia was meticulous, too meticulous. Her every move was planned with precision, as if she already anticipated each of your steps. The coldness with which she admitted everything, the lack of remorse, the superiority in her voice, it was eating him up inside. He had always been a logical, practical man, but now, for the first time in a long time, reason didn't seem to be enough. He wanted her to feel the same despair, the same humiliation that he felt. He wanted her to pay. He called his lawyer, his voice coming out more controlled than he expected. I need to know exactly what my options are. Everything. If there is any wrongdoing, any loophole, any error that we can use against her, I want to know. The lawyer hesitated for a moment before responding. James, can I be honest with you? If she's planned this for so long, she may have covered up all the flaws. But if there's a single slip-up, we'll find it. I just need time. Time. Time was something James felt he didn't have. Every minute that passed, Olivia continued to live comfortably, sure of her victory. He needed to act quickly. I don't care how long it takes, I want this resolved. Tomorrow morning, I'll be in the office. He hung up before the lawyer could argue anything. Dawn advanced while he remained there, in the car, staring at the emptiness of the road. He thought about everything he had built over the years, every sacrifice he made, every moment he put work above himself, everything to ensure a stable life, a secure future. And Olivia destroyed everything without hesitation, without any hint of doubt. How could someone who shared a lifetime with him be capable of something so cruel? He wanted answers, but he knew he wouldn't get them. Some people just don't feel guilt. And Olivia was one of them. As dawn began to dye the sky orange, he started the car and drove to his office. The lawyer was already waiting for him, a pile of documents on the table. James pulled up a chair, ignoring the tiredness weighing him down. Tell me what you found. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and leafed through some papers. Olivia transferred some of her assets to an account that wasn't linked to the two of you directly. But the signature used to authorize some of those transfers, there's something off about it. It doesn't appear to be yours. James frowned. Are you saying my signature was forged? The lawyer nodded slowly. We still need to confirm, but if this is proven, we may be able to invalidate some of these transfers. This would mean that at least some of your assets can be recovered. James felt a spark of hope rise within him, but he didn't allow himself to celebrate just yet. What do we need to do to prove this? The lawyer looked at him seriously. We need an expert to analyze the signatures, someone who can legally certify the forgery. But that could take time. Time. Again, that damn word. But this time, he knew he needed to be patient. Do whatever you have to. I want it all back. The lawyer nodded and began making the necessary calls. James left the office feeling like he finally had a plan. But he knew that wouldn't be enough. Olivia was smart, and if she realized he was moving against her, she would certainly have an ace up her sleeve. He needed to anticipate, he needed to be one step ahead. And to do that, he needed to know her better than ever. He decided he couldn't just wait for the lawyers to work. I needed to understand every detail of her plan, every move she made. And to do that, he needed to confront her again. He returned home, but this time, he didn't go in. He stayed outside, watching. Olivia was inside, living normally, without any apparent worries. He felt his anger rising, but he controlled it. He couldn't afford to act on impulse. Not now. He picked up the phone and called. She answered after the third ring, her voice calm, almost amused. James, I already missed you. I thought it would take longer for you to look for me. He gritted his teeth. I need to see you. Olivia let out a low laugh. And why would I want that? James took a deep breath. Because if you think you won, you might want to hear what I have to say before you celebrate too soon. The silence on the other end of the line was long. Then, she spoke, a curious tone in her voice. Very well. Where and when? They scored in a discreet cafe, away from prying eyes. James arrived early, sat at a table in the corner and observed the environment. When Olivia walked in, he couldn't help but notice how calm, confident she looked. She sat across from him, crossing her legs elegantly. So what's so urgent it couldn't wait? James looked straight into her eyes. You forged my signature. Her smile faltered for a brief moment, but then recovered. And if I had, what could you do about it? James leaned forward slightly. I already have experts analyzing the documents. If there are any irregularities, everything could be invalidated. You could lose what you stole. Olivia twirled her coffee cup between her fingers, considering his words. And you think you'll be able to reverse everything that easily? She tilted her head, studying him. You can even try, but you know as well as I do that justice doesn't work in your favor. It could take months, years. In the meantime, who do you think will suffer more? Me, who has already adapted to my new life, or you, who is trying to recover what you lost? James felt his frustration rising, but he held his ground. You're not going to get away with this, Olivia. She smiled, an amused gleam in her eyes. Maybe not, James. But by then, I'll have enjoyed everything it took you a lifetime to build. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to maintain control. This isn't over yet. Olivia laughed lightly. I know. And that's what keeps me entertained. She stood up, picked up her bag and gave him one last look. Good luck, James. You're going to need it. He saw her leave, her blood boiling, her thoughts in a whirlwind. But he knew one thing, Olivia underestimated his determination. And that would be the mistake that would cost her dearly. James left the cafe feeling the weight of the conversation still burning inside him. Olivia played dirty, but he already knew that. The way she spoke, the way she twisted her lips into a mocking smile, the lightness with which she treated what she did, all of this made him feel cold, calculated hatred. He knew that acting on impulse would be a mistake. Olivia wanted this. She wanted him to lose control, to do something rash, something that would allow her to turn the tables in her favor again. But he wasn't going to give her that taste. He drove to his office without even remembering the route. The lawyer was already there, waiting with stacks of documents, financial transaction reports and analyses that indicated where she had been meticulous and where she might have made a mistake. James threw himself into the chair and ran his hands over his face, exhausted but determined. "Tell me we have something." The lawyer leafed through some papers, adjusting his glasses. "Her signature forgery is a serious problem for her, but we still need to prove it legally. I've already requested an expert's analysis, and that could take a few days. But there's something more." He handed a report to James, who quickly scanned the pages. She not only transferred assets, but also hid part of the assets in an account that is in the name of a third person. James frowned, his heart racing. "Who?" The lawyer hesitated for a moment before responding. "The man she was with at the restaurant." The revelation hit him like a punch in the gut. Her lover. Not only did Olivia betray him emotionally and financially, but she also involved someone else in the manipulation. This complicated things. He felt anger rising, but he held himself back. "What does this mean for me?" The lawyer leaned forward, eyes attentive. "It means that if we can prove that there was collusion between the two, that he actively participated in the diversion of assets, we can take that to court and not only reverse part of the transfers, but also accuse them of fraud." James took a deep breath. "Could this take time?" The lawyer nodded. "Yes, but now we have something solid. You need to be prepared to face this strategically." James nodded slowly. He had no choice. I needed to play at the same level as Olivia. If she thought she had already won, she was about to find out that she had underestimated the wrong person. Night fell, and James drove back home, or rather, to the apartment he was temporarily renting. He couldn't bear the thought of going back to the house he built with Olivia, knowing that she was still there, living as if nothing had happened. He threw himself onto the couch, his body exhausted but his mind racing. He took out his cell phone and started looking for information about Olivia's lover. He wanted to understand who he was dealing with, he wanted to know everything about him. The deeper he got into the research, the more his stomach turned. The man had a clean record, at least on the surface. Businessman, well connected, but there was something that caught his attention. Small filed cases, discrete financial disputes, suspicious movements in businesses that, on paper, seemed legitimate, but had connections with companies that evaporated from the market without leaving a trace. Was Olivia involved with someone dangerous? Or did she know exactly what she was doing? James felt a different weight this time. He thought he knew Olivia, but the more he found out about what she did, the more he realized he never really knew her. The emotional betrayal was already devastating, but the fact that she had engineered it all so coldly, with so much calculation, was even worse. He picked up the phone and made a call he never thought he would need to make. The ring-tone echoed a few times before a deep, familiar voice answered. "James. I didn't expect to hear your voice so soon." He clenched his jaw, trying to ignore the bitter taste of this conversation. "I need information. About a man named Ethan Carter." On the other end of the line, there was a brief silence before the answer. "This isn't something you order over the phone. Where can we meet?" James took a deep breath. "Tomorrow. I'll send the location." He hung up, knowing he was about to dive even deeper into something he might not have been prepared to face. The next day dawned with a heaviness in the air. James met with his contact in a discreet bar, away from prying eyes. The man waiting for him there had dealt with situations like this before. He slid an envelope across the table unceremoniously. "This guy is not a saint." But that's not all. James opened the envelope and began reading the information. The more I read, the more my blood ran cold. Ethan wasn't just a businessman with shady dealings. He had already been investigated for money laundering, corporate fraud and, worse, there were suspicions of involvement in a scheme that financially exploited women in relationship agreements. Did Olivia know this? Or had I fallen into his game without realizing it? James let go of the paper and faced his contact. Is this reliable? The man nodded. If you want to go after him, make sure you're prepared. Those kinds of people don't play fair. James closed his eyes for a moment. Olivia may have thought she was in control, but had she also been manipulated? Could it be that, in the end, she was just a piece on the board of someone more experienced? He left the meeting with his mind buzzing. Now he had a choice. He could use this information to ruin Olivia and her lover at once, expose them, bring them to ruin without hesitation. Or he could use it another way, in a way that guaranteed him an even bigger blow, a victory that was definitive. But to do so, he would need something he no longer knew he had: patience. Olivia has always been a player, but maybe this time she was playing a bigger game than she could handle. And James was about to turn the rules against her. The first thing he did was call his lawyer. I need to meet with the finance team. I have information that can help us better understand the situation. The lawyer agreed, and James knew this was just the beginning. He needed to move carefully. Olivia still believed she was in control, and he needed to maintain that illusion for as long as possible. But the truth was that the game had already changed. And this time, he wasn't just trying to get back what was his. He was about to make Olivia understand what it means to truly lose. Night came and, once again, James found himself in front of the house he once called home. But now, he wasn't there to fight. He was there to observe. To understand. To wait for the right moment. Olivia had done what she did because she believed he wasn't capable of responding in kind. She thought she knew all the pieces of the game. But now, there was one she didn't see. And when he finally noticed, it would be too late. James pulled away, his expression unreadable. He didn't need to act now. He didn't need to explode, scream or take revenge in a hurry. He just needed to wait. Because soon, Olivia would realize that the real winner wasn't the one who attacked first. He was the one who knew exactly when to deliver the final blow. The right moment arrived sooner than James imagined. Olivia still thought she had won, that she had taken everything from him, that she had left him with no way out, but what she didn't know was that James already had checkmate in hand. He knew how to wait, he knew how to act without her noticing, he knew how to transform his own pain into a strategy. Her every move was analyzed, her every mistake was documented, her every word was recorded. She thought she controlled the game, but she never imagined that James wasn't just trying to get back what was his. He wanted something much bigger. He wanted Olivia to taste defeat, he wanted her to taste despair, he wanted her to understand what it meant to lose absolutely everything. Proof of fraud came faster than expected. The expert confirmed that James' signature had been forged, making some of the transfers illegal. That, in itself, was enough to nullify most of the blow Olivia had given. But James didn't just want to turn things around. He wanted to bury her. It was then that he made the final move. With the information about Ethan Carter, Olivia's lover, he did what she never expected, he turned everything over to the authorities. Every suspicious movement, every connection between Ethan and fraudulent companies, every detail of the scheme he operated. Ethan wasn't just an accomplice to treason, he was a criminal disguised as a businessman. Olivia fell for his game thinking she was in control, but in the end, she was used just as much as she used James. News of the investigation fell like a bomb. Ethan tried to run away as soon as he knew they were after him, but the police were faster. He was arrested before he could even clear his accounts. And that's when Olivia realized the size of the mistake she made. She became involved with a man who used her plan to hide his own crimes. And now, she was in the middle of it all. Justice was not blind, not when there were documents that proved his direct involvement in the movement of the money. She tried to defend herself, she tried to blame it on Ethan, she tried to claim she was tricked, but none of it mattered. Because the evidence was there. And James made sure each one was delivered at the right time. The hearing was quick. Olivia's lawyers tried to minimize the damage, tried to negotiate a settlement, but there wasn't much that could be done. Ethan had already been convicted, and his defense tried to reduce his sentence by handing over valuable information, including about Olivia. She wasn't innocent, she wasn't just a victim. She planned, engineered, and stole. And now he would pay for it. The sentence came as a blunt blow: fraud, embezzlement of assets, forgery of documents. Prison sentence. She tried to beg, tried to argue, tried to hold on to any shred of hope, but there was no escape anymore. James was there, sitting in the front row of the courtroom, watching every moment, every expression of despair that finally took over Olivia's face. She looked at him, as if expecting some reaction, some trace of compassion, but he felt nothing. Absolutely nothing. Just the relief of knowing she was finally paying for everything she'd done. When the sentence was given, she broke down. The mask fell. Despair took over. But it was too late. The judge banged the gavel, and in that moment, Olivia knew that her life as she knew it was over. James left the courtroom without looking back. There was nothing left there for him. What Olivia did could have destroyed him, but in the end, it only strengthened who he was. He lost a lot, but he didn't lose himself. And that was all that mattered. He rebuilt his life, without rushing, without carrying the weight of the past. And it was in this process that he met someone. Someone who didn't come to fill a void, but to show that love doesn't have to be a game, that trust doesn't have to be a weakness. He learned to live without fear of being deceived, but with the certainty that he would never ignore the signs again. Olivia was forgotten in time. The world she tried to build with lies crumbled beneath her feet. No money, no allies, no way out. Ethan, in turn, also paid his price. Every crime, every scam, every act of manipulation found its sentence. In the end, he and Olivia became exactly what they tried to avoid, prisoners of their own choices. James, on the other hand, found his peace. It wasn't an easy path, but it was a necessary path. And looking back, he knew that in the end, it was Olivia who lost everything. Because betrayal never ends with a winner. If you've made it this far, I want to know your opinion on this story. What did you think of the ending? What would you have done in James's place? Leave your comment, I really want to know what you think. And if you're not yet subscribed to the channel, take the opportunity to subscribe and follow more stories like this. Remember, here, betrayal is never romanticized. It always takes a toll.